Good afternoon and welcome, Lord Prescott. Today, of course, is a very historic day. We have the triggering of Article 50 and Brexit, but we've also had today some very interesting discussions within the Labour Party. I wonder if you could first of all just tell us about the meeting that you've been at earlier today.
Well, you're right. It's a very historic day, and particularly with the announcement on 50 about coming out of the European Union. But what that does also, it's going to redistribute all the money that we're putting into Europe, and powers are going to come back. The meeting we're having today, where does that money and power go? Does it go to central government? Does it just go to nation states? Do the regions like mine have a share in it? And we're now looking today for the first time, working as a group, how we should play our part and getting a fairer distribution of the resources and powers, which is now started with 50.
In the event we had just now, the public event, Kezia Dugdale said fairly early on that the Constitution is not natural territory for the Labour Party. Do you agree with her on that?
Well, it depends what you mean. Again, in the debate, it was, what do you mean by federalism? If you mean that states and regions are the same, no, they're not. They are different. But they both have a desire to be fairly distributed power, accountability, and their own prosperity. So when Kezia was talking about the Constitution, it's a very bold word. What do you mean by that? Then people say, we don't have a Constitution. What we are talking about is changing a central government, the most centralised in Europe, giving greater share of its power and resources to the regions and the states. They are different. One's a state, one's a region. But in my region of the north, there are more population in the north than there is in Northern Ireland, in Scotland, and in Wales together. So we need to rethink it. That means constitutional change. That's what we're doing when we're leaving Europe. We're changing our laws constitutionally, bringing them back to Britain, whether you agree with it or not. How do you redistribute it? We want the constitutional change, not the old fix.
And this is notoriously complicated territory. In the discussions that you had this morning, were we starting to see already a clear direction in which a Labour response to Brexit and the challenges of the Constitution can be formed?
Yes, I think we are, because as I was demanding, say, for the English region, you've got extra powers in Wales. You don't think it's as much as Scotland, so you already have powers and you're asking for more. And the Barnett formula tends to leave the English regions out of it and just gives to the states. So what we're saying is, let's find the common language, the common powers, and begin to define what we mean. So instead of just saying we stand for constitutional change, explain it. How is it different to ordinary people? How will it help in jobs, in prosperity, the economy, reducing the differences between the north and the south, or the states and the regions? That's quite a step forward. Some difficult questions, but we've started for the first time having that meeting here, called together by Carmen, and we had a Labour Party meeting where we've never had a row. We're all convinced to go in the right direction.
Okay. If we're looking at regionalism within England, what regions should we be talking about? Is it the city regions that the Conservatives have talked about recently?
I defined the regions under Labour, and it was called what we did with our policy. I was involved in bringing devolution to Wales, to Scotland and Northern Ireland, and to London with the mayor. On the English regions, we started it in one called the Northern Way, but the Tories scrapped it. So what we need to do, regions have normally been defined on the basis of local government boundaries. So I tell you, once you start along that, you get into real trouble. But you can have regions. We've had regions before. So it's the southwest, the northwest, northeast. All those regions then have identified, and they're big enough to have some accountability. And so regions is important. And why is it important? You need the local government, but you need strategic decisions being made by regional governments, wider than the metropolitan authority, say like Manchester, one that decides from one end of the country to the other, which we did with regional development agencies. So we had 4. The government's brought in 11 of these enterprise boards, though they kept RDAs for Scotland and Wales. We're saying those strategic decisions cannot be made by hundreds of local authorities. They need, with the local authority involved, a strategic plan. It's called regions. By the way, the government hate the concepts of regions, so what they call it is sub-regional. No, got it wrong. Sub-national. Yeah. So the Transport for the North plan, which we're now supposed to be governments bringing in, is called not a regional strategy from Liverpool to the northeast. It's sub-national. because they don't like the word regions. So it's easy to define, and people are identified in a regional sense. They know they live in the north, or they know they live in the northwest, different from Yorkshire and Humberside. There is an identity, and that's important, not to get too big, like government controlling everything, but some accountability at different levels, and that's what these proposals are about.
Yeah. One of the things you talked about earlier, very interestingly, was the need to translate potentially very arcane constitutional changes, including maybe regional government, into language that people can understand and relate to. Would you take any, say, lessons from the North East referendum some years ago about how you can best do that?
Well, I hoped to win in the North East. They'd been calling for regional government for long enough, but the mistake was I couldn't get the same powers for the North East as I got for Scotland and Wales. And I said, that's wrong. There should be similar powers. But when in the North East, you have to change local government structure, as we did there, into what we call the kind of county authorities, change into unitary authorities. All the councils got caught up in arguing about who's going to be on the boards of what. And most people then saw it's just another county council or another council, and they were fed up with leaving it to councils. So I paid the price for it, simply because we didn't treat them with the same powers and resources and differentiation that we did for the states. Now we're saying the regions have an equal right to look at how those powers are properly distributed.
So would you be in favour of the idea of actual, primary lawmaking powers, parliaments and governments being established at the English regional level? That would be quite a radical step, wouldn't it?
Well, it would be. It depends. You've got to pick the functions. But if you come to finances, I'm quite happy to say, and they're already beginning to do it in Scotland and Wales, they give them more share of the taxation. The Barnett formula, usually controlled and still is by central government. And then they can make the decisions about that. That's already beginning to happen slowly in the nation states. They still want more that Kywin was asking for today. We don't have that. We face massive cuts in the regional and local government. For example, they've given extra money to Manchester in the big coordinating northern devolution, but the cuts local authorities have suffered are far greater than the extra money they're giving them for what they might call this northern powerhouse. So that is central government deciding what is politically right, instead of the people themselves having greater share of the money that's raised in their area and actually invest and making the decisions themselves. So yes, I'm all for that, and it's other things about making decisions. Skills and training, why can't that be made in the region? Why is it a centrally governed decision saying you're going to get it this way, when the needs of each region, as the states, are quite different? And that's what was important in the discussions today, that you don't just divide the money on a per capita. Each area has different needs. So if you're going to allocate more resources to meet those needs in that region, they should have some say how it's going to be spent. Now, you get that partly in Scotland and Wales. We're asking for more powers for it. Yes, if you want to be accountable, it is about money. It is about power. I'd be happy to take some of that ready power from central government and give it to the regions. You've done it for the states. Start hanging about for us.
Okay. Finally, if it may change tack slightly, today is a historic day with the triggering of Article 50, the beginning of the formal process of the UK leaving the European Union. How does that make you feel? Are you sad, or do you see this mainly as a great opportunity?
I'm an old man. I go back a bit in this. So I fought against the common market entering, right? I always felt it'll turn itself into a political union, a kind of federal Europe, which I'm not in favour of. In reality, it has. But my view is now how I want it to remain. Why? Because it's a global world. It's determined by a few big countries. I spent a lot of time on environment, like from Kyoto, and I've seen how the big powers, the global powers, stitch it up between themselves. In that world, Britain in Europe was the one that has the big partner in the big game. Now we're pulling out of it. And I'm sad about that. Actually, I always feel it probably won't come about. I think the circumstances will be so bad, there'll be another demand for another referendum, though I think Parliament should take its own courage and make its own decision instead of ducking it out to referendums.
Well, there are several whole other conversations we could have on that, but for now, John Prescott, Lord Prescott, thank you very much.
Thank you, a joy.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thank you.